He was just a little boy when his life changed forever. Anakin Skywalker was born on a sandy planet called Tatooine. The sun was always shining and the sand stretched as far as anyone could see. Life on Tatooine was hard. Anakin lived with his mother, Shmi, and they didn't have much money. They didn't have fancy toys or big houses, but they had each other. Even as a little boy, Anakin was different. He could fix things that were broken faster than anyone else. Pod racing was the big sport on Tatooine, and Anakin loved it. He didn't just love it, he was amazing at it. He could build and repair pod racers and then drive them faster than anyone else. People who watched him couldn't believe it. Some even whispered that he might be special, but no one really knew why. One day, a man named Qui-Gon Jinn came to Tatooine. He was a Jedi. Jedi were kind of like space knights. They could use something called the Force, which gave them special powers. The Force helped them do amazing things, like move objects without touching them, sense danger, and sometimes even know what other people were feeling. Jedi were brave and wise, and they worked to keep peace in the galaxy. Qui-Gon met Anakin by accident, but he quickly realized something very important. Anakin was strong in the Force. In fact, Qui-Gon had never felt anyone like him before. He saw the boy's heart and his skills, and he knew that Anakin could become a very powerful Jedi someday. Qui-Gon wanted to take Anakin to the Jedi Temple to train him. But there was a problem. Jedi were supposed to be trained from a very young age, and Anakin was already older than usual. Still, Qui-Gon believed in him. Before Anakin could leave, he had to race in the pod racing tournament. This wasn't just any race, it was dangerous, and many pod racers got hurt or worse. But Anakin was fearless. He knew this could be his one chance to leave Tatooine and start a new life. He climbed into his pod racer, felt the wind in his face, and focused. The engines roared. The other racers tried to pass him, but Anakin was too clever and too fast. With courage and skill, he won. Winning this race wasn't just about the trophy, it meant he could go with Qui-Gon and begin a new adventure. Leaving Tatooine was hard. Anakin loved his mother and his home, but he also knew he was meant for something bigger. Qui-Gon promised he would take care of Anakin and help him learn how to become a Jedi. So Anakin said goodbye to his mother, and together he and Qui-Gon flew into space, leaving the desert behind. As the stars stretched out around him, Anakin felt a mix of excitement and fear. He was going to learn to be a Jedi, but he didn't yet know how difficult it would be. The first days of Jedi training were confusing. Anakin was used to doing things his own way, fixing pod racers and winning races. Now he had to learn discipline, patience, and control. Qui-Gon taught him how to focus on the Force, to listen to it, and to trust it. Anakin struggled at first. Sometimes he got frustrated and acted too fast, but Qui-Gon always reminded him to stay calm and think. Anakin also learned about the Jedi Code. Jedi had rules about helping others, not letting anger take over, and using their powers for good. These rules were not easy for a boy who had spent his life surviving in the harsh desert. He had to learn to be careful with his emotions and to think about how his actions affected others. Even though Anakin was just starting, he showed moments of greatness. He could sense danger before it happened and sometimes move objects with his mind without even trying. Qui-Gon was amazed by his abilities and believed that, with the right guidance, Anakin could become the most powerful Jedi ever. But Qui-Gon also worried. Anakin's heart was full of strong feelings, and that could be dangerous if he didn't learn control. Life with Qui-Gon was full of lessons. They traveled from planet to planet, meeting different people, and Anakin learned about the galaxy beyond Tatooine. He saw planets with trees, oceans, and cities that reached the clouds. He also saw places full of danger, and he learned that being a Jedi meant protecting others, even when it was scary. Anakin was learning every day. Jedi training was not like pod racing. He couldn't just rush or use speed to get what he wanted. He had to practice patience and listen to the Force. Qui-Gon taught him how to meditate, which meant sitting quietly, closing his eyes, and paying attention to his feelings. At first, Anakin didn't like it. Sitting still was boring compared to racing pod racers, but slowly he began to feel the Force around him. It was like a gentle wind that helped him see things clearly and feel when others were in trouble. One day, Qui-Gon brought Anakin to a Jedi temple on a big, busy planet. This was where many young Jedi trained. The temple was huge, with tall towers and rooms full of books, lightsabers, and other Jedi students. Anakin felt nervous and excited. He had never seen so many Jedi before, all moving with calm and purpose. Some of them looked very serious, while others were kind and welcoming. Anakin realized that he was not just learning to be strong, he was learning to be wise too. It was here that Anakin met Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan was not only a skilled Jedi, but also very kind and patient. Qui-Gon introduced them and said Obi-Wan would watch over Anakin and help him learn. At first, Anakin thought Obi-Wan was too strict. He didn't like being told what to do, and sometimes he wanted to rush ahead. Obi-Wan taught him that patience and careful thinking were just as important as speed or strength. Slowly, Anakin began to respect Obi-Wan, and the two became close friends. Learning to use a lightsaber was one of Anakin's favorite parts of training. A lightsaber was a glowing sword that could cut through almost anything. Anakin loved how it hummed and glowed, but it was also dangerous. Qui-Gon warned him, "A Jedi uses a lightsaber to defend, not to hurt." Anakin practiced every day, learning how to move quickly, block attacks, and strike safely. Sometimes he made mistakes and accidentally knocked things over, but he kept trying. The more he practiced, the faster and stronger he became. Training wasn't all fun, though. Anakin often felt frustrated. Sometimes he got angry if he couldn't do something perfectly, or if someone told him he had to wait. Qui-Gon noticed this and taught him about controlling emotions. He said that strong feelings like anger or fear could lead a Jedi down a dangerous path. Anakin didn't always understand, but he wanted to be a good Jedi, so he tried his best. One of the hardest lessons was learning about attachment. Jedi were taught to care for others but not become too attached because it could lead to fear and sadness. This was very difficult for Anakin. He loved his mother very much, and he missed her terribly. Sometimes he would think about Tatooine and feel lonely. Qui-Gon reminded him to focus on the Force and trust that he could protect the people he loved by being a strong Jedi. Even with challenges, Anakin showed incredible talent. He could sense danger before it happened, and he often surprised his teachers with clever ideas. Obi-Wan sometimes shook his head in disbelief at how fast Anakin learned, but he also knew that Anakin's strong feelings could be dangerous if he didn't learn control. Qui-Gon believed that Anakin could bring balance to the Force, but he also knew it would not be easy. Anakin's days were filled with lessons, practice, and adventures. He learned to use the Force to move objects, to feel danger, and to stay calm in scary situations. He learned lightsaber techniques, strategy, and the importance of helping others. Slowly, he began to understand what it meant to be a Jedi, not just to be strong, but to be wise, kind, and brave. Despite the challenges, Anakin felt happy. He had left the deserts of Tatooine behind and was now learning to be part of something bigger. He was making friends, learning amazing skills, and feeling the Force grow stronger inside him every day. But even as he grew stronger, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan both noticed that Anakin had a fire inside him, a fire that could light the way for good, or if not controlled, could burn too brightly and become dangerous. After months of training at the Jedi Temple, Anakin finally got his first real mission. It wasn't easy, and it was different from anything he had done before. Qui-Gon explained that Jedi didn't just practice lightsabers and meditation, they also helped people in trouble. Sometimes this meant stopping fights, solving problems, or protecting someone in danger. Anakin was nervous but excited. He wanted to show that he could be a real Jedi. Their mission took them to a planet called Naboo. There, a group of bad people called the Trade Federation was causing trouble. They had taken control of the planet and were hurting innocent people. Anakin felt angry when he saw this. He didn't like seeing anyone hurt, especially children or families who were just trying to live their lives. Qui-Gon reminded him to stay calm and think before acting. Anakin took a deep breath and promised to do his best. During the mission, Anakin got to use his pod racing skills in a new way. The Jedi had a plan to sneak into the city and help the people who were trapped. Anakin's quick thinking and ability to stay calm under pressure helped them move safely. At one point, he even saved a small group of people who were about to be caught. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were proud, but they also reminded him that every action has consequences. A Jedi had to be careful and think about the bigger picture, not just the moment. Anakin also faced his first real fight. He used his lightsaber to block attacks and defend his friends. It was scary, and he felt a rush of emotions, fear, anger, and determination all at once. Qui-Gon guided him, showing him how to focus on the Force instead of letting fear control him. Slowly, Anakin learned that bravery wasn't about fighting the hardest, but about staying calm and making smart choices. Even though the mission was successful, it taught Anakin something very important. Being a Jedi wasn't just about being powerful. It was about responsibility, patience, and caring for others. He began to understand that strength alone wasn't enough. A Jedi needed wisdom and kindness too. Anakin started to see that his anger and strong feelings could be helpful if he used them carefully, but dangerous if he let them take over. Back at the Jedi Temple, Anakin continued his training with renewed focus. He practiced lightsaber skills every day, sometimes sparring with Obi-Wan. These practice fights weren't just about winning, they were about learning control, strategy, and teamwork. Obi-Wan would sometimes scold him for rushing or getting frustrated, but he also encouraged Anakin when he did well. Slowly, Anakin began to trust Obi-Wan's guidance and learned to listen better. Anakin also started learning about strategy and problem-solving. Jedi missions often required thinking ahead, planning carefully, and working together. Anakin realized that he couldn't always act alone. Even though he was talented and fast, teamwork made him stronger. He learned to trust others and to share his own ideas, which made him a better Jedi. Despite his progress, Anakin sometimes struggled with homesickness. He missed Tatooine and his mother, Shmi. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan reminded him that it was okay to miss home, but he had to focus on his responsibilities as a Jedi. They promised that one day he could return, but for now he had a job to do. Anakin slowly learned that being a Jedi sometimes meant making hard choices, like leaving the people you love to help many others. By the end of this mission, Anakin felt proud but also more aware of his own feelings. He realized that being a Jedi wasn't just about winning fights or being strong. It was about learning control, being patient, and helping others even when it was difficult. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were happy with his progress, but they also knew there was still much for him to learn. Anakin's heart was growing stronger, and so was his connection to the Force. Every day he practiced, learned, and faced new challenges. He was becoming faster, smarter, and braver, but he also learned that power could be dangerous if it wasn't guided by wisdom and care. Anakin was on his way to becoming a great Jedi, but the journey was just beginning, and many lessons were still ahead. As Anakin grew stronger in the Force, he also began to notice how complicated the galaxy could be. Not everything was black and white. Some people made bad choices, and some people did things that seemed confusing. Sometimes even Jedi had to make hard decisions. Anakin found this difficult because he wanted to help everyone and fix problems quickly. But the Jedi taught him that patience and careful thinking were very important. Anakin's bond with Obi-Wan grew stronger during this time. Obi-Wan became more than a teacher. He was a friend and a guide. Anakin admired Obi-Wan's wisdom, his calmness, and the way he seemed to always know the right thing to do. But Anakin still had his own way of thinking, and sometimes that led him into trouble. He wanted to act fast while Obi-Wan would remind him to pause and think. This caused small arguments, but it also taught Anakin how to balance his energy with patience. The Jedi Temple also introduced Anakin to new subjects. He learned about diplomacy, how to solve problems with words instead of fighting. He studied the history of the Jedi and the Force, learning stories of past Jedi who had been brave and wise. He learned about politics too, which was very confusing. There were many planets, each with their own leaders and rules. Jedi had to be careful and fair, and sometimes they had to help in situations that weren't easy to understand. During training, Anakin faced tests that challenged his emotions. Jedi had to learn to control anger, fear, and sadness. This was very hard for Anakin because he felt emotions very deeply. When he thought about leaving Tatooine or his mother, his heart ached. When he faced danger, his anger sometimes bubbled up. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan taught him to channel these feelings through the Force instead of letting them control him. Slowly, Anakin learned to calm himself and use his emotions to focus and protect others. Anakin also started having dreams and visions about the future. Sometimes he would dream about people he loved in danger, and it made him feel scared. Jedi taught him that these visions were a gift from the Force, a way to help guide him. But they were not always easy to understand. Anakin had to learn to listen carefully, to pay attention to what the Force was telling him, and to act wisely when he could. Another important part of training was learning teamwork and leadership. Jedi often worked together on missions, and Anakin had to learn how to follow instructions and also guide others. He learned that being a leader wasn't just about telling people what to do. It was about listening, caring for others, and making the best choices for everyone. This was a hard lesson for Anakin, who had always been used to relying on himself. One of Anakin's favorite lessons was learning to trust the Force in unexpected situations. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan would give him challenges where he had to rely on his senses and instincts instead of speed or strength. Sometimes he had to solve puzzles or navigate tricky paths using only the Force. These exercises made him clever and patient. Anakin loved them because they made him feel connected to the Force and reminded him that being a Jedi was about more than fighting. It was about understanding, thinking, and protecting life. By this time, Anakin was growing more confident, but he also noticed that being a Jedi came with responsibilities he had never expected. He began to understand that the galaxy was full of challenges, and that sometimes, no matter how fast or strong he was, he couldn't fix everything alone. Anakin realized that being a Jedi meant using his power carefully, thinking about others, and being brave even when it was hard. Even with all the lessons and challenges, Anakin still felt excitement. He loved learning new things, discovering the Force, and practicing his skills. He was growing stronger, wiser, and more skilled every day. But deep down, he also knew that the future would bring tests that were even harder than pod racing or missions. He felt a fire in his heart, a mix of hope, courage, and determination that would guide him through the challenges ahead. Anakin was not just a boy from Tatooine anymore. He was becoming a Jedi, learning to balance power with wisdom, emotions with patience, and strength with kindness. And though the path ahead was uncertain, he knew one thing. He was ready to face it, step by step, with the Force as his guide. As Anakin continued his training, something very sad happened. Qui-Gon Jinn, the Jedi who had discovered him and believed in him, was gone. He had died protecting others, and Anakin felt a deep sadness and anger. Losing Qui-Gon was hard because he had been like a mentor and a friend. Anakin didn't understand why someone so good could be taken away, and the feeling of loss stayed with him. Obi-Wan, who had promised to take care of Anakin, tried to help him. He reminded Anakin that being a Jedi sometimes meant facing pain and learning to stay calm even when things were unfair. Obi-Wan became Anakin's master. This was a big change because now Anakin had to follow Obi-Wan's guidance more closely. At first, Anakin felt frustrated. He was used to being clever and fast, and sometimes he thought he knew better than anyone else. Obi-Wan was patient but firm. He taught Anakin that being a Jedi wasn't about showing how strong you were. It was about thinking carefully, helping others, and controlling your feelings. Slowly, Anakin started to understand that Obi-Wan's lessons were meant to protect him, not to hold him back. Training became more serious. Anakin learned advanced lightsaber techniques, studied the Force in more detail, and practiced using his powers with care. Obi-Wan gave him small missions to help others, which helped Anakin see how Jedi made a difference in the galaxy. Each mission was a lesson about responsibility, teamwork, and the choices Jedi had to make. Sometimes Anakin's emotions made these missions hard. He wanted to act quickly, but he had to learn patience. He wanted to protect everyone, but he had to think about the bigger picture. During this time, Anakin's feelings for people became more complicated. He cared deeply about his friends, the people he protected, and especially about his mother, who was still on Tatooine. He realized that his love for them made him stronger, but also made him worry. Obi-Wan reminded him that Jedi had to balance their feelings with wisdom. Anakin was learning that being a Jedi was not just about lightsabers and the Force. It was also about controlling the heart. Anakin began to face real challenges that tested his patience. Some missions were dangerous, and he had to make quick decisions. Sometimes people doubted him or didn't understand his ideas. Anakin learned that even when he was frustrated or angry, he had to stay focused. Every challenge helped him grow stronger, both in skill and in character. Obi-Wan reminded him that the Force was always there to guide him, but Anakin had to trust it and not let fear or anger control him. At the Jedi Temple, Anakin made friends and allies, but he also noticed that not everyone understood him. Some students thought he was too reckless or too emotional. Anakin didn't mind being different, but it sometimes made him feel lonely. Obi-Wan reassured him that being a Jedi meant following the right path, even if others didn't always understand. This helped Anakin trust himself and the Force more. Anakin's skills continued to grow. He became faster, stronger, and more clever in using the Force. He could sense danger, help people in need, and make split-second decisions that saved lives. But Obi-Wan always reminded him that power was not everything. A Jedi's true strength came from wisdom, patience, and caring for others. Anakin slowly started to understand this, even though he still struggled with his strong emotions. By the end of this part of his journey, Anakin was no longer just a boy from Tatooine. He was a young Jedi Knight in training, learning how to balance his feelings with the responsibilities of being a protector of the galaxy. He had faced loss, danger, and difficult choices, but he had grown stronger with each challenge. The Force was growing inside him, and he was beginning to understand that his journey had only just begun. Even though the path ahead was filled with challenges, Anakin knew he wanted to do good and protect those he loved. He had learned courage, patience, and the importance of listening to the Force. And while he sometimes felt fear, anger, or sadness, he was starting to understand that a true Jedi controlled their heart as well as their mind. As Anakin grew older, his training became more challenging. Jedi training was not just about fighting or using the Force. It was about learning self-control, understanding other people, and making careful choices. Obi-Wan, now his master, pushed him to think before acting. Sometimes Anakin felt frustrated because he wanted to solve problems quickly, but Obi-Wan reminded him that rushing could lead to mistakes. Anakin was learning that patience was just as important as speed and skill. Anakin also began to notice how different people in the galaxy lived. He had left Tatooine, but he still remembered the hard life he had there. Seeing other planets and cities made him realize how lucky he was to be training as a Jedi. But it also made him feel sad when he saw people suffering. Sometimes he wanted to help immediately, even when Obi-Wan told him to wait or plan carefully. These moments taught Anakin that being a Jedi wasn't just about power, it was about responsibility and thinking ahead. During training, Anakin's bond with Obi-Wan grew even stronger. Obi-Wan was patient and understanding, and Anakin began to see him as a brother. Obi-Wan shared stories about past Jedi and helped Anakin understand how the Force worked in daily life. Sometimes Anakin still argued or acted impulsively, but he also learned to listen. Obi-Wan reminded him that a Jedi must balance heart and mind. Anakin started to understand that following guidance didn't make him weak, it made him stronger. Anakin also faced emotional challenges. He loved his mother deeply, and sometimes he thought about her constantly. He worried for her safety and wished he could protect her. Jedi taught him that caring for others was good, but being too attached could lead to fear and sadness. Anakin tried to balance his feelings. He wanted to help his mother and friends, but he also had to stay focused on his Jedi duties. These lessons were hard, but Anakin was beginning to understand the importance of controlling his heart. During missions, Anakin had to face real danger. He helped protect villages, stopped criminals, and sometimes even faced enemies who wanted to hurt innocent people. He felt fear and anger in these moments, but he also felt courage. He learned that being a Jedi wasn't about being fearless. It was about staying calm and doing what was right, even when he was scared. Every challenge made him stronger and more confident in his abilities. Anakin also discovered that his emotions could give him strength when used wisely. His anger sometimes gave him courage in dangerous situations, but if he let it control him, it could be dangerous. Obi-Wan reminded him that strong feelings were like a fire. They could warm and protect, or they could burn out of control. Anakin practiced controlling his emotions, using them to focus and trusting the Force to guide him. Even with all his training, Anakin sometimes felt lonely. He had friends at the Jedi Temple, but not everyone understood him. Some students thought he was reckless or too emotional. Anakin learned to trust himself and the Force, even when others doubted him. Obi-Wan reminded him that being a Jedi was about doing what was right, not what was easy or popular. This helped Anakin grow stronger in his mind and heart. By the end of this period, Anakin had changed a lot. He was no longer just a boy from Tatooine. He was a young Jedi, skilled with a lightsaber, strong in the Force, and learning to control his emotions. He understood that being a Jedi meant responsibility, patience, and caring for others. He had faced danger, loss, and temptation, and he was growing stronger with every challenge. Anakin knew that his journey was far from over. The galaxy was full of challenges, and the path ahead would test his heart, mind, and skills in ways he could not yet imagine. But he felt ready. With Obi-Wan by his side, his connection to the Force growing, and his determination to protect those he loved, Anakin was prepared to face whatever came next. He was learning that being a Jedi was not just about power, it was about courage, wisdom, and the choice to do what was right, even when it was hard. And though the road ahead was full of tests, Anakin felt a fire inside him, ready to guide him through the challenges yet to come. As Anakin grew older, he began to notice something very confusing about being a Jedi. He was strong in the Force, brave and skilled with a lightsaber, but he also felt emotions that were hard to control. He cared deeply about the people around him, his friends, his teachers, and especially his mother. This love sometimes made him feel joy, but it also made him feel fear and sadness. Anakin didn't always understand why these feelings were so strong, and sometimes they made him frustrated or impatient. One of the hardest lessons was learning about attachment. Jedi were taught to care for others, but not to become too attached, because attachment could lead to fear, anger, or even hate. For Anakin, this was very difficult. He missed Tatooine and his mother constantly, and he worried about what might happen to her. Obi-Wan tried to help him understand that attachment could be dangerous, but Anakin felt that his feelings were part of who he was. He didn't want to let go of the people he loved. During missions, Anakin saw the consequences of fear and anger. Sometimes he wanted to act too quickly or take risks to protect others. He had to remind himself to trust the Force and think before acting. These experiences taught him that being a Jedi wasn't just about strength. It was about wisdom and self-control. Anakin began to understand that his emotions could give him courage if he managed them, but they could also lead him into trouble if he didn't stay careful. Anakin's bond with Obi-Wan continued to grow. Obi-Wan was more than a teacher now. He was like a brother and a friend. Anakin learned to listen to his guidance, even when he didn't fully agree. Obi-Wan helped him practice patience, plan ahead, and think carefully before using his powers. He reminded Anakin that the Force was a guide, and that trust in the Force and in others was just as important as skill or speed. But Anakin's strong emotions sometimes caused inner conflict. He was proud of his abilities and clever ideas, and he sometimes felt that the rules of the Jedi slowed him down. He wanted to help people quickly, even if it meant breaking the rules. This was dangerous because Jedi had to follow the code and make decisions carefully. Anakin began to realize that his greatest challenge wasn't enemies or battles, it was learning to control himself. At the Jedi Temple, Anakin also made new friends, but he noticed that not everyone accepted him easily. Some students thought he was reckless or too emotional. Anakin sometimes felt alone, even in a crowd. But he learned to trust himself and the Force. He realized that being a Jedi wasn't about being popular. It was about doing the right thing, even when it was hard. Anakin's connection to the Force grew stronger every day. He could sense danger, predict outcomes, and feel the emotions of people around him. These abilities made him special, but they also made him responsible. He was learning that being powerful meant nothing without wisdom and self-control. Obi-Wan reminded him that the greatest Jedi were not the strongest, but the ones who could guide their emotions and act with courage and kindness. Despite the challenges, Anakin began to see his path clearly. He wanted to protect people, help those in need, and use his powers for good. He knew that the road ahead would test him in many ways, emotionally, mentally, and physically, but he was ready to face it. He understood that the choices he made now would shape who he would become. By the end of this period, Anakin had learned that being a Jedi was not just about lightsabers or the Force. It was about understanding his heart, trusting in the Force, and learning patience, wisdom, and responsibility. The fire inside him, his courage, his determination, and his love was growing stronger. And though the future held challenges he could not yet see, Anakin was beginning to understand that the path of a Jedi was about balance. Balance between power and wisdom, emotion and reason, and fear and hope. As Anakin grew older, he began to face challenges that were harder than lightsaber training or missions. These challenges were personal, about feelings and choices, and they tested him in ways he had never experienced before. One of the hardest times was when he started to worry more and more about his mother, Shmi, back on Tatooine. Even though he was far from home, he felt a strong connection to her. He worried about her safety constantly, and this worry sometimes made him feel anxious, frustrated, and even angry. Obi-Wan noticed that Anakin was struggling. He reminded him that love and care were important, but that fear and anger could be dangerous if they were allowed to take control. Anakin tried to follow this advice, but it wasn't easy. His feelings were deep and strong, and sometimes they overwhelmed him. He realized that being a Jedi wasn't just about fighting enemies or using the Force. It was also about controlling his heart and mind. During training, Anakin's abilities continued to grow. He became faster, smarter, and more clever in using the Force. He could sense danger before it happened, predict outcomes in tricky situations, and protect people in ways others could not. This made him proud, but it also made him feel pressure. He wanted to be perfect, to always protect the people he loved, and to never make mistakes. Sometimes this pressure made him act rashly or impatiently. Obi-Wan had to remind him to slow down and think carefully before acting. Anakin also faced temptations that tested his patience and loyalty. He noticed that using his powers to get what he wanted could sometimes be easier than following the rules. For example, if he became frustrated with someone, he might feel the urge to use the Force to make them do what he wanted. Jedi taught that this was wrong, and Obi-Wan reminded him that the Force was not a tool for selfish desires. Anakin struggled with this because he felt that sometimes rules slowed him down, but slowly he learned that true strength came from self-control, not shortcuts. Life at the Jedi Temple was also full of lessons about friendship, respect, and teamwork. Anakin learned that being part of a team meant listening to others, trusting their ideas, and sometimes putting their needs above his own. This was difficult for someone who was used to being independent and clever. But over time, he began to understand that teamwork didn't make him weaker. It made him stronger. During missions, Anakin had to make choices quickly. Sometimes people he cared about were in danger, and he wanted to rush to help them. He learned that he had to balance courage with caution. Acting too quickly could put everyone in danger, but hesitating too long could also be harmful. Each mission taught him how to think carefully, trust the Force, and act wisely. Anakin also began to realize the importance of trust. He trusted Obi-Wan and the Jedi Council to guide him, and he learned to trust the Force to show him the right path. At the same time, he realized that others sometimes doubted him. This could make him feel frustrated or alone, but he learned that his strength did not depend on approval from others. What mattered was doing what was right and following the Force. By the end of this period, Anakin was no longer just a young boy learning to be a Jedi. He was a skilled, thoughtful, and courageous young man, aware of the challenges that came with power. He understood that being a Jedi was not just about lightsabers or strength, but about controlling his heart, making wise choices, and learning patience and responsibility. Anakin's journey was far from over. The galaxy was still full of danger, difficult decisions, and challenges that would test him in ways he could not yet imagine. But he was ready to face them. His connection to the Force was strong, his heart was determined, and he was learning that true courage came not just from skill, but from wisdom, patience, and the choice to do what was right, even when it was hard. As Anakin grew older, he began to face challenges that went beyond training or missions. One of the hardest lessons came from loss. Even though he had traveled far from Tatooine, he could never forget his mother, Shmi. He worried about her constantly, and those worries became real when he learned that she had been captured by dangerous people. The news hit him like a wave. Anakin felt fear, sadness, and anger all at once. He wanted to save her immediately, but the situation was complicated, and he had to think carefully. Anakin's feelings were intense. He wanted to rush in and use all his power to protect his mother, but Jedi teachings reminded him to stay calm and rely on the Force. Obi-Wan guided him through the mission, helping him balance his emotions with careful planning. This was one of the first times Anakin realized how strong his emotions could be and how they could both help and hurt him. His love and care gave him courage, but his fear and anger made the situation much harder to handle. When Anakin finally reached Tatooine, he found that it was too late. His mother had died. The sadness and anger he felt were overwhelming. He had never experienced loss like this before. For the first time, he understood how much pain could come from caring deeply about someone. Anakin's grief was so strong that he struggled to control it, and for a moment, he let his anger take over. He fought fiercely against the people who had harmed her, using his skills and power with intensity and fury. Obi-Wan had to intervene to help him regain control and prevent him from going too far. This loss taught Anakin a very important lesson, even though it was painful. He realized that even when someone he loved was gone, he still had choices about how to respond. Jedi taught him to feel sadness, but not to let it control him. He had to channel his emotions into focus and courage instead of letting anger take over. This was one of the first times he truly understood the fine line between bravery and letting emotions become dangerous. Back at the Jedi Temple, Anakin found it hard to talk about his feelings. He felt frustrated with the Jedi Council because they didn't fully understand what he had gone through. Sometimes he felt that rules and patience slowed him down, especially when lives were at stake. He wanted to act immediately to help, but the Jedi Code required careful thought. This caused inner conflict as Anakin struggled to balance his emotions with the responsibilities of being a Jedi. Obi-Wan supported him during this time, helping Anakin work through grief and frustration. He reminded Anakin that loss was part of life, and that being a Jedi meant learning to protect others while also guiding oneself with wisdom. Anakin began to understand that strength wasn't just physical. It came from patience, control, and making the right choices, even in hard moments. Despite this tragedy, Anakin continued to grow in skill and courage. He practiced lightsaber techniques, studied the Force, and undertook missions that tested his judgment and teamwork. Each day, he learned a little more about balancing his heart with his responsibilities. He understood that being a Jedi wasn't only about fighting or winning. It was about protecting others, thinking carefully, and controlling his emotions. By the end of this period, Anakin had faced one of his first real tests of character. He had experienced deep loss, frustration, and anger. He had learned how powerful emotions could be and how careful he needed to be when using the Force. Anakin realized that being a Jedi meant making hard choices, facing grief, and learning to act with wisdom and courage. Even with all the pain, Anakin's connection to the Force continued to grow. He felt determined to protect those he loved and to use his skills to help others. He was learning that being a Jedi required not just strength, but also patience, understanding, and the ability to control one's heart. And though the road ahead would bring even greater challenges, Anakin was beginning to understand what it truly meant to be a Jedi. As Anakin grew into a young man, his training with Obi-Wan became more advanced and serious. He had already faced many challenges, loss, anger, fear, and difficult choices. But now he was learning to combine all the lessons into being a true Jedi. He practiced lightsaber skills daily, but he also focused on understanding the Force, helping others, and making wise decisions. Each day brought new challenges that tested his patience, courage, and judgment. Anakin and Obi-Wan's bond had grown stronger than ever. They were no longer just master and student. They were like brothers. Obi-Wan guided Anakin not only in skill but also in wisdom, helping him understand how the Force worked and how a Jedi should act in the galaxy. Anakin respected Obi-Wan and began to trust his advice more deeply, even when it was difficult to hear. This trust was important because it taught him that even the strongest Jedi needed guidance. During missions, Anakin showed his cleverness and bravery. He could solve problems quickly, sense danger before it arrived, and protect those who were in trouble. He learned to act not just with strength, but with thoughtfulness, using his abilities to help others instead of for his own gain. Each mission helped him understand the responsibility that came with his powers. He was no longer just a talented boy from Tatooine. He was becoming a Jedi ready to face bigger challenges. Despite all his growth, Anakin still struggled with strong emotions. He cared deeply about his friends and the people he loved, and sometimes this made him impatient or frustrated when things didn't go as planned. Jedi taught him to control these feelings, to act with calm and wisdom, and to trust the Force to guide him. Anakin was learning that controlling the heart was just as important as controlling a lightsaber. Anakin's visions and dreams continued to grow. He sometimes saw danger or people in trouble, and these visions made him think carefully about the future. Jedi taught him that the Force was a guide, helping him make better choices, but that he had to act wisely. Anakin was beginning to understand that foresight and patience were just as important as courage and skill. By this time, Anakin had learned the importance of teamwork, respect, and loyalty. He understood that being a Jedi meant working with others, listening to advice, and making the best choices for the greater good. He had learned that power alone was not enough. Wisdom, patience, and kindness were what truly made a Jedi strong. Anakin also continued to grow in skill and confidence. He was faster, smarter, and more powerful than ever before, but he was learning to combine this with self-control. He practiced moving with the Force, sensing danger, and using his abilities to protect life rather than for selfish reasons. Each day he became more balanced, more thoughtful, and more capable. As his training neared this stage, Anakin began to feel ready for the bigger challenges that lay ahead. He had faced loss, danger, temptation, and frustration, and he had learned lessons from each experience. He understood that being a Jedi meant responsibility, courage, patience, and control. His heart was strong, his mind was sharp, and his connection to the Force was deep. Anakin's journey from the deserts of Tatooine to the Jedi Temple had been long and full of lessons. He had grown from a clever, brave boy into a young Jedi, ready to face the galaxy and protect those who could not protect themselves. He had learned that strength alone was not enough, and that being a Jedi meant balancing power with wisdom, heart with mind, and courage with patience. Though he did not yet know all the trials that awaited him, Anakin was ready to step forward. He had learned to trust the Force, to value guidance, and to control his emotions. He had grown stronger, braver, and wiser, and he was prepared for the adventures and challenges that would soon lead him to the events of Attack of the Clones. And as he looked toward the future, he carried with him the lessons of his past, the courage of a podracer, the wisdom of his teachers, and the fire of a heart determined to protect the galaxy. Anakin Skywalker was just a little boy when his life changed forever. He was born on a sandy planet called Tatooine, where the sun always shone and the sand stretched as far as anyone could see. Life there was hard. Anakin lived with his mother, Shmi, and they didn't have much money or fancy toys, but they had each other. Even as a young boy, Anakin was different. He could fix things that were broken faster than anyone else, and he loved pod racing, the dangerous sport of high-speed racing through the desert. One day, a Jedi named Qui-Gon Jinn came to Tatooine. Jedi were brave knights who could use the Force, a special power that helped them move objects without touching them, sense danger, and sometimes even feel what others felt. Qui-Gon quickly realized that Anakin was very strong in the Force and believed he could become a powerful Jedi someday. Before Anakin could leave Tatooine, he had to race in a dangerous pod racing tournament. With skill, courage, and clever thinking, Anakin won the race, earning the chance to leave with Qui-Gon and begin his Jedi training. Life with Qui-Gon was full of lessons. Anakin had to learn patience, control, and how to listen to the Force. He learned about the Jedi Code, which taught him to use his powers for good, to be kind, and to stay calm even in danger. At the Jedi Temple, Anakin met Obi-Wan Kenobi, who would watch over him and help him grow. Anakin liked using his lightsaber, a glowing sword, but he had to learn that a Jedi used it to defend, not to hurt. Though he sometimes acted too quickly, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon helped him understand that Patience and thinking carefully were just as important as speed and skill. Anakin's first real mission took him to a planet called Naboo, where bad people called the Trade Federation were hurting innocent people. He used his pod racing skills in new ways, helped protect others, and fought bravely under Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon's guidance. Through this mission, Anakin learned that being a Jedi wasn't just about being powerful. It was about responsibility, teamwork, and helping others wisely. He began to see that his strong feelings could give him courage, but if he wasn't careful, they could be dangerous. As Anakin grew, he also faced lessons about emotions. Jedi taught him to care for others but not become too attached, because attachment could lead to fear or anger. This was hard for Anakin because he loved his mother and friends deeply. He sometimes missed home or felt frustrated when missions were complicated. Obi-Wan helped him balance these feelings, teaching him that courage and wisdom came from controlling his heart as well as his mind. Anakin's training continued to grow harder. He learned diplomacy, history, and the importance of teamwork. He practiced sensing danger, using the Force in clever ways, and making decisions that helped others. He started to understand that being a Jedi meant responsibility, patience, and self-control. He learned that strength alone was not enough. Wisdom, kindness, and careful thinking were what truly made a Jedi powerful. Despite all his progress, Anakin faced real challenges of the heart. He worried about his mother, felt frustration when rules slowed him down, and struggled with temptations to use the Force selfishly. Jedi taught him to trust the Force, listen to guidance, and control his emotions, and he began to learn how to channel his feelings into courage and focus. His connection with Obi-Wan grew stronger, and Anakin started to trust him like a brother, learning that even the cleverest Jedi needed advice and guidance. One of the hardest lessons came when Anakin finally returned to Tatooine and found that his mother had died. His sadness and anger were overwhelming, and for the first time he truly realized how powerful and dangerous strong emotions could be. He learned that even in pain, a Jedi had to make careful choices. Obi-Wan helped him regain control, teaching him that the Force could guide him through grief, but only if he acted wisely. As Anakin neared the end of his early training, he combined all he had learned. He had faced loss, fear, temptation, and frustration. He had grown stronger, faster, and more clever. But he had also learned patience, responsibility, and the importance of controlling his heart. He understood that being a Jedi wasn't just about fighting or using the Force. It was about protecting others, thinking ahead, and acting with wisdom and courage. Anakin's life as a Padawan was full of missions, and each one taught him something new about being a Jedi. One of the first missions he went on with Obi-Wan took them to a planet that was being threatened by bandits. The planet's villages were small, and the people there didn't have many defenders. The bandits were stealing food, scaring the villagers, and causing trouble. Anakin felt his anger rise as he saw innocent people being hurt, but Obi-Wan reminded him to stay calm and plan carefully. Together, Anakin and Obi-Wan observed the bandits' movements. Anakin wanted to rush in immediately, but Obi-Wan taught him the importance of patience. They studied the terrain, learned the bandits' patterns, and made a plan. Anakin used the Force to sense danger and anticipate the bandits' actions. When the time was right, they acted swiftly. Anakin moved with incredible speed, disarming traps and using his lightsaber to block attacks without harming anyone unnecessarily. During this mission, Anakin learned the value of strategy. He realized that being clever and strong was not enough. He had to think ahead and protect the people first. The villagers were amazed by the young Jedi, and Anakin felt proud. But he also remembered Obi-Wan's lesson. A Jedi's actions were not about showing off, but about helping others. This mission taught him that true courage was not just about fighting. It was about planning, protecting, and keeping people safe. After the mission, the villagers thanked Anakin and Obi-Wan. Anakin felt happy, but he also felt the weight of responsibility. He understood that every choice he made could affect lives. This realization made him more thoughtful and careful in future missions. Obi-Wan praised his skill but reminded him to always balance courage with wisdom. Anakin began to see that being a Jedi was a constant journey of learning and growing. Another mission took Anakin and Obi-Wan to a distant planet, caught in a dispute between two rival groups. The planet's leaders had begun fighting over resources, and the people were suffering. Anakin was frustrated that violence was occurring, but Obi-Wan reminded him to be a mediator first. They had to use their skills to negotiate peace rather than fight. Anakin learned that diplomacy was sometimes harder than combat. He had to listen carefully, stay calm, and help both sides find a solution. At first, he wanted to act with force, but he realized that a Jedi's strength also came from understanding, patience, and words. With Obi-Wan's guidance, Anakin helped create a plan that allowed the groups to share resources fairly. It was one of his first lessons that being a Jedi wasn't always about fighting. It was also about solving problems peacefully. As missions continued, Anakin grew more confident in the Force. He could sense danger before it happened, help others in tricky situations, and anticipate problems. But he also faced challenges that tested his emotions. He sometimes felt frustration when people didn't listen, or anger when he saw injustice. Obi-Wan guided him through these moments, teaching him how to channel his feelings into focus rather than letting them take over. One particularly dangerous mission involved tracking a group of pirates who were attacking trade routes. Anakin and Obi-Wan had to move stealthily through forests, cliffs, and rivers, avoiding traps and ambushes. Anakin's skill and quick thinking saved them multiple times, but he also learned that rushing into danger could have consequences. This mission taught him that courage was important, but patience and teamwork were even more crucial. By the end of these missions, Anakin had grown not only stronger and faster, but also wiser. He was beginning to understand what it meant to be a true Jedi, to protect, to serve, and to balance strength with responsibility. His bond with Obi-Wan grew deeper, and he learned to trust his master's guidance while also trusting his own instincts. Every mission taught him a little more about the Force, about people, and about himself. Anakin was no longer just a clever, strong boy. He was a Padawan, learning the true meaning of courage, responsibility, and the choices that came with power. Each mission, each challenge, and each success shaped him into a Jedi ready to face the galaxy, step by step, alongside Obi-Wan. After gaining more experience on his first missions, Anakin was sent with Obi-Wan to a planet called Malastare. Malastare was a busy world, famous for its pod racing and trade, but it was also a place where conflicts sometimes erupted between rival groups. This mission wasn't just about fighting, it was about diplomacy, investigation, and protecting innocent lives. Anakin felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. He knew he would have to use all his skills and rely on Obi-Wan's guidance. Upon arrival, Anakin quickly noticed something unusual. The planet's leaders were arguing over control of the trade routes, and tensions were rising. Small fights had broken out between guards and local citizens, and innocent people were being caught in the middle. Anakin wanted to charge in immediately and stop the fights, but Obi-Wan reminded him that a Jedi's first goal was to understand the situation and seek peaceful solutions. Patience, he said, was a Jedi's ally. Anakin used the Force to sense danger and gather information. He could feel the fear, anger, and frustration of the people around him. This ability helped him understand not just what was happening, but why it was happening. He realized that solving the problem required careful planning and clever thinking, not just lightsabers and speed. Together with Obi-Wan, Anakin met with the leaders, listened to their grievances, and helped them find common ground. It wasn't easy. Sometimes one side tried to trick him or push him into acting rashly. But Anakin was learning to stay calm and focused. During their work, a small group of troublemakers attacked a local settlement. Anakin and Obi-Wan had to move quickly. Anakin used his agility, lightsaber skills, and the Force to protect civilians and disarm the attackers without causing unnecessary harm. The people were amazed at how he seemed to predict danger and react just in time. Obi-Wan reminded him afterward that true Jedi power wasn't about winning fights. It was about saving lives and keeping balance. Later in the mission, Anakin faced another challenge: a hidden group of smugglers trying to exploit the conflict for their own gain. Tracking them required stealth, observation, and clever thinking. Anakin discovered traps and obstacles along the way. At one point, he had to leap across a canyon using only his instincts and the Force to guide him. He felt the thrill and danger, but he also remembered Obi-Wan's lessons about patience and control. Using the Force, he safely navigated the terrain and helped capture the smugglers, preventing further harm to the innocent people of Malastare. This mission taught Anakin an important lesson about responsibility. Being powerful was not just about being fast or strong. It was about protecting others, solving problems wisely, and acting with care. He realized that even small choices could have big consequences. The citizens of Malastare were safe because he had listened, thought carefully, and acted at the right moments. It wasn't just skill or courage that saved them, it was wisdom, patience, and the guidance of the Force. By the end of the mission, Anakin felt proud but also thoughtful. He had learned that being a Jedi was about more than defeating enemies. It was about understanding people, guiding them, and sometimes using brains over brawn. He realized that even as he grew stronger in the Force, the greatest lessons would always come from experience, responsibility, and thinking carefully about the choices he made. Anakin returned to Obi-Wan and the Jedi Temple with more confidence. He had faced danger, solved complex problems, and protected lives, but he also knew that there would always be more challenges ahead. The galaxy was vast and threats were never-ending. Each mission taught him something new about courage, patience, and the importance of balancing heart and mind. Anakin was no longer just a talented boy from Tatooine. He was a growing Jedi, learning the true meaning of his power and responsibility.